All right, so you're welcome to today's class. We should start module, sorry, we should start module 4. Just want to share how we go from there. All right, so but before, can you see my slide just to be sure?
Yes, we can.
Okay. But just because of Ben, who I'm meeting for the first time today, I'll just quickly do a quick introduction, and he will introduce himself. Then we'll delve into the class for today. Now, the way the mind works in mysterious ways, that I would say, such that you'll be surprised what you absorb, even when you are not thinking. And that's what you need to leverage on, because if you want to read the way we used to read when preparing for biology or chemistry, or when you're doing all those theoretical courses where you have to write an essay, then we'll be in problem, because you would exert too much energy on one page, two page, trying to see if you can recall. At least that's the way I knew how to read before. Trying to recall, okay, I've read this, okay, I'll now start asking myself questions on that and try to understand. So that way, in reality, you might never be able to read more than one page or two page a day. But if you read it as someone just reading through, just to gain general knowledge about the stuff, and from time to time, flip back if you solve a question and you see it concerns a particular context or technology that you've read through, but you can't remember everything in detail. You go back and you just skim through that section alone at that particular point in time. It's more effective than trying to get everything in at once. All right. And the reason why we also mentioned that you do the staggered reading of one domain per day is because if you were to read from page 1 to page 248, one after the other, it will frustrate you to the end. But you find out that some sections are more interesting than others to different people. For people who have been in the governance side of things, who have been doing audit work, your domain 1, 2, and even 3, for someone who has handled some projects before, all right, it's easy because they are speaking the terms that you are conversant with. You've done project management before, how to your Gantt chart, you know how to manage a project. You might not have managed maybe a software development project, but project is project anyway. So the idea is now, okay, applying it to a particular line of business, which is software development, rather than maybe asset acquisition and all the likes. So I would suggest read the manual as though you're reading a light novel. That's my suggestion. I can be, you can try it and maybe tell me I'm wrong, but it has worked. And this is something that I always tell every student that ever go through me. If you concentrate or exert too much energy, you will get yourself worn out. So just read it lightly, and don't punish yourself for not remembering things you've read. Rather, when you try to recollect and you don't remember, just flip through to the page and just read only that section. That way, it's more ingrained in your mind. You save more time than when you try to memorize the whole manual. Now, and because of this challenge of maybe being too voluminous, is the other reason why I introduced us to the Google Notebook LM. And you saw how we used it in our class, the Sunday practice session. Now, that's just for practice. On a normal day, when you're reading through the text, let's say you want to read, like in domain 4, you have like 15 sub topics. All right. So you have 4.1, 4.2, up to 4.16, or the likes. Now you can tell the Notebook LM to summarize the topic on, let me look for what is in that let's say 4.5. Let's give me a minute going through the manual. Domain 4.5 speaks to end user computing and shadow IT. You can just tell the notebook LM with your manual already uploaded, ask it to please summarize I mean, the major points about what did I call it now? End user computing and shadow IT. It will define what end user computing is. It will tell you what shadow IT is. It will tell you what the concerns around shadow ITs are. All right. I mean, when you hear shadow IT sounds like a big thing. But I've always told us that when you're answering questions, if you don't understand the technical side, just use your layman language. When you hear the word shadow, it means a reflection. It's not the real thing, but a reflection. All right. So, and if you say shadow IT, you say in layman English, reflection of IT. So it's not the real IT infrastructure, but a similitude of your IT infrastructure. So more like a parallel government. Just the same way in Nigeria, you have the federal government, and then you have the Boko Haram running a parallel government in the north. I mean, killing all those they want to kill, and you have those in the south running the government around the waterways and the likes. So when you talk about shadow IT, you're looking at okay, what tools are people using in your organization that is not authorized by the company. All right. So today, almost all application can be virtualized. And what I mean by that is it can be made portable. All right. So I personally like using 7-zip. On my office laptop, I can't install because I'm not an administrator, but I have access to my SharePoint or my drives. I mean, my Google Drive and all of that. I have access to OneDrive. Yeah, yeah, Microsoft OneDrive. And you find out that these are the same storage tools that your office use, so they can't block it. So when you say shadow IT, someone like me, the shadow IT tool that you might say I'm using is okay, maybe I'm using what do you call it now, 7-zip to unzip because it's not part of what is installed or pre-installed on my laptop and I don't have admin right. Or I use a particular tool called Green Shot, all right, for better cropping of pictures and then annotating them. I mean, it's more professional than the sniping tool where you have to use freehand to circle around things. So, but this one you can draw boxes, you can take notes on it, and it looks professional. So I use that. All right. So, but these are not tools that are sanctioned by the office. All right. But they are not tools that harm the office either. But then you have people who can actually, using the same method which I'm mentioning, bring in unsanctioned tools that can be used to harm the organization. So your shadow IT is talking about, yeah, a parallel government or a parallel IT infrastructure of some sort. So what I'm trying to point out is this: read it as just you're reading light books. Now, if you have your program or your plan, which I told us to draw up, but I mean nobody shared what they drew up with me. So, but if you want me to see it, you can share with me. What I would have expected is in your plan, you say, okay, for this week I should cover in domain 4.1 to 4.3 to, I mean, for this week. That is on Thursday. If domain 4 is on Thursday, I should cover 4.1 to 4.3. Now, if I read that stuff, let me see. Okay, I can't see the page here, but if you have the number of pages and it's okay, I mean, this 4.1 to 4.3 is like 20 pages or like 10 pages. You read through it as if you are reading a novel, and then you go to your notebook LM and tell it to summarize the major concepts or the contents of 4.1, which is IT components. Tell it to describe describe networking, describe computer hardware components architecture, describe common enterprise backend devices, describe USB mass storage devices, describe wireless communication technologies, describe hardware maintenance programs, describe hardware reviews. These are the 7 subsections or subsections of 4.1, right? Now, that way, having read through the main book itself, and you now go to Notebook LM and tell it to do a summary, you now have a short, then when we are doing biology, you have key points, chemistry key points, biology key points. That will now be like your own key points, things to just quickly remember. All right. So, just to address what Tosin has said, the truth is it's voluminous, but there are ways around it. First of all, read through it as if you're reading through a novel. Don't overtax yourself to remember everything. And by the time you're done reading through it, you also go to Notebook LM and ask it to summarize the sub chapters and give you the main points and things that you need to take note of there. All right. That way, it's more like a reinforcement. And then when you now solve a question and you get that particular concept and you don't understand it, you go back to the aspect in the manual where it is and you will just read through. In fact, you can even put it in your Notebook LM and it will take you to the exact page where it's highlighted there. And I think we saw that during our Sunday practice session together. So I don't know. Tosin, was that helpful? I mean, is this something you can adopt? This approach I just described, is it something you
Yes, yes. I think I'll try to adopt that this week. Of
okay?
course, I think what I'm just a bit concerned about, maybe because that's why I'm reading in detail, is that I've had the privilege of going through the questions, right? And sometimes it could be that thing probably you have probably overlooked. Let me just use that word. I would now, so
Yeah.
really, that concept, right? So, but I will try this week when I start reading again. Once I start reading again, I'll try this. What's it called? It's just that sometimes those things that you just overlook, you just find them in the exam, and you're now sweating profusely. So you now be like, boy, then that it will be so. That's probably why I have gone in detail into
I
it to
understand.
say, so. But it's okay. I think I'll do that and try it, right, and see if it's what's it called. I just maybe I just don't want to miss anything out, right? Because maybe I'm
Yeah,
new to the field and things like that. Maybe that's the reason why I'm reading it.
but I feel you'll be all right if you ask me.
Yeah.
I feel you'll be all right. But thanks for bringing it up. I also want to quickly share one more thing with you. I mean, when it comes to aspect that you should focus on, I'm switching to another note here. So just let me know. Can you see the manual that I'm sharing? Can you see anything on my screen?
Yes,
I know
yes,
your
your screen
screen.
is up.
Okay,
Yeah.
good, good. Now, ISACA has, I mean, at least in the old manual, this soft copy I have is not putting it in the text box the way it is. Now, in the 27th edition and other things, it will put in a rectangular box on the page and say notes, what you should pay attention to. So what I just did was I quickly did a search of the soft copy which I have here and see what the notes are. And you have here a note. This is on domain, sorry, you see the chapter here. Yeah, 1.6, 1.6. So I guess this is domain one, yes. So let's see here, you see, let me go back. So the first note, CISA candidates should be knowledgeable about when to perform compliance or substantive tests. So if all you call it now, Neri was taking this class. One of the things I expect that he would also focus on is this particular thing. Okay, how do you know if you are to do a substantive test or a compliance test? So if you do a search in your text and just look for notes, I mean, it's something that if I were you, I can copy this out and then let it be a guide at least at minimum. All these 91 notes that ISACA has put here, I should be able to what's the English? I should be able to know it. So like this second one, let me see if I can scroll down to chapter 4 and just check some notes there. It's a small text, but it covers a lot. But let's see. So here, I think this is the first note from here. It says, vendor-specific terminology is used within manual for illustrative purpose only. So if, for example, you see they call one vendor or the other, candidates will not be examined on the components of vendor-specific hardware offerings or vendor-specific terminology unless the terminology has become generalized and is used globally. So if you're talking about AWS or Azure, when we're talking about cloud computing or the virtualization environment, we're talking about maybe what do you call it now, VMware and the likes. If it's mentioned, it's just for illustrative purpose. In the exam, it's vendor agnostic, so it's not going to ask you things specific to maybe one vendor or the other. It's just the principles that it's going to be testing you on. Now, let me see if I can move ahead from this point. Yeah. So here it says, see chapter 5, protection information asset for more information on appliances. Now, these appliances that we're talking of, so in your domain 4, it will talk a little bit. So there's always an overlap. You see things like here, you're talking about VPN, routers, switches, IPS, IDS, firewalls. It will just give you, I mean, what it's saying here basically, these are under common enterprise backend devices, what makes the engine run. I mean, how you connect different systems, how you ensure the secure communication between the external network, your internal networks, and everything. It just speaks generally on this, but it's telling you that you will see more details about these back-end enterprise services in your domain 5. So when you are reading through here, the goal is not to understand fully what exactly is router, switches, VPN. The ones that are, I mean, you get to understand basically, yes, in general. If they are going to go in depth, it's saying that you should check domain 5 where it's going to talk more on that. So for me, I would say that going through the notes section of when you read through the manual, right? As you're reading through as a novel, when you come in contact with where it says note, then try to pay attention there and maybe even drill deeper. It might be at this particular topic, you can then Google, do a YouTube video, check a YouTube video on it, just get a good grasp of what he's trying to say. So, like here now, this other notice says some disaster recovery arrangement may require additional licensing, hosting of additional meeting softwares. So you get more on that in your disaster recovery plan. And this came up under where we're talking about software licensing issues. All right. I mean, issuing of software licenses. So, I mean, these are things that we deal with in day-to-day IT environment. So just in addition to the two things I've said before, when you're reading through the manual, pay attention to the notes that ISACA has told you to pay attention to. The main things it puts under the note here, I think you should pay attention to so that you focus on the major, major on major, minor on minor. There are some things that are in the manual. It's just for your knowledge. It will tell you clearly that it's not going to test you on it in the exam. So when you are reading such an area and it says, this particular stuff, it just need you to know it, but it's not going to test you on it, then you know that you won't need to focus too much energy here. That's why I said just read through as though you're reading through your novel. Pay attention to the aspect that it has told you to take note of. Then you use your Google LM to do summary of those sections that you've read through, just for you to take note of your key point areas. That way you will how will I put it now, you will actually do very, very well in whatever you intend to do. Thank you. I believe I should have been able to cover the questions you asked properly. That's it.
Yes.
Um,
Thank you for
okay.
that.
Thank you very
That's the
much.
point. Thank you.
Chidi, hi, were you able to read in the course of the week? Sorry, it's taking time, but it's important. Don't worry, we will still cover up, and I mean, I'll be able to still cover the things I need to cover for today. Chidi, are you able to
Yes.
speak? Yeah.
Um. So far, so good. So I guess not as much as I would have liked. I'm doing a lot of um, of reading like a novel, just like you suggested. And
Yeah.
yeah, I think it's helpful because what I do is I read a chapter or as much as I can, just breezing through some of the concepts that I already know. I move to the ones that I'm not aware of, and then I use YouTube a lot. But when I go, I counter last week when we did IDS, I watch a couple of videos on IDS, stuff like that. And then I go back to answer questions. And then you see that when you're answering questions, just like you said, there are certain lines or things that words that you come across, even though I don't understand what it means, but I know I have seen this word before. And then I'm able to go back and focus on those particular things that my brain did not pick up when I read as a novel. So yeah, I that's what I've been doing. That's how I like to read. Actually, I like to, like Tosin said, I like to focus on, if possible, focus on the things that I know that are important. But in this case, I don't think there is a way to know exactly what's going to be important. So I have to go through the route of reading the whole book. But so far, what I've been doing is, yeah, read the book like a novel, which is I plan to do is cover the book from end to end at least once. And then when I'm done, focus on the parts that I think are are really important, because I know there's no way I'm able to cram that whole book in between now and August. So I will still have to take my chances and focus on what I think is important based on when I go through past questions. What do I think are reoccurring based on notes? Like you said, what are things that I think are key and important? That's how I plan to do it, and that's what I've been doing.
Okay. Thanks for sharing your process. Yeah. If there are questions along the way, feel free to also ask. I think I've asked Ebenezer, I've asked Bola Shade. Virola, yeah.
Oh, okay. I've been studying at least morning and night. And also, I try
Okay.
to focus on, I think, domain 2, 3, 4. Those were at least, those were where my weak domain. But at least domain 1 and 5, I'm good with that. But I'm trying to just read every morning and evening and solve some questions.
Okay. Okay.
Yep.
Were you able to do it every day, right?
Yes, every day for now, because I'm planning on taking it again in July.
You know, you're doing solo ranger now. Yeah. It's all right. But that means in the first exam you did,
Yeah.
your in five you had a good score there, right?
Yes, very good score. In 5, I had 360. At least okay. I had over
That's nice.
300 in one and in 1, 5, and 4. But 2 and 3, I had two something in 2 and 3.
Okay. But
Yeah.
you know that the three something is not okay though for 1 and 5. So you have a lot. You still have some work to do there, even though not as much
Yes.
as me, because
Yes.
the um cutoff mark or the pass mark is 450, and
Yes.
so you have to get at least 450 across board, or get very high in some, and then it upsets each other, even though they don't do an average. They use some weighted form of estimation to do those calculations. I think one of my students who failed by a slim portion, I think it was just maybe 1 mark or two. He actually challenged ISACA, trying to see, I mean, if it was by average, if they did average of all his marks, he should have scored above 450. But ISACA had to explain to him that it's a weighted average and not just a direct average. So the goal is, I mean, the encouragement here is let's not lean on our horse, let's push on all sides. I'm happy that you at least recognize the aspect that you need more work, and the place that, I mean, you need lesser work, just give it enough work to get to the point where you're now above par on all bases, so that you're able to scale through well at this time. All right, thanks, Varela, for sharing. Really appreciate your
Yep.
candid
Okay.
opinion. All
Thank
right,
you.
so let me go back to the slide and see what we can do. So Like I said, the domain 4 outline itself, it's not too bulky, but we will discuss the main things here, and any other thing that comes up along the way, we would also try to share. Would also, I think we would look at one question: information system operations and business resilience. We would look at the overview of the domain, look at the outline, what exactly are we supposed to cover, what's the learning objective or task statements. A lot of times when I start a course, I actually start delving deep right from from the task statements, so that at least you have a feel of what exactly you should be able to do at the end of the day. Then you have your part A is just looking at your information systems operations, basically IT operations. All right. What are the things you need to make your IT infrastructure work? What are the portions of IT that makes the world go round? You have your server, you have your network devices, firewall, IPS, IDS, and the likes. Um, then the part B, it's now that we understand what makes our IT systems run, how can we build resilience? How can we build um, that grit nature into our infrastructure in such a way that it cannot be easily brought down by simple attacks? Or, I mean, we try to protect ourselves. How can we protect our IT infrastructure against denial of services, any form of attack that would impact our ability to continually serve our customers, right? So, in a nutshell, those are just the two things we have to look out for. And maybe if you look at it, it seems this stuff is not really a big deal. It's not a big topic. Now, the previous lecturer before me, I think he takes this domain in maybe a class or two and is done. I will try not to rush it too much like that. All right, but because the goal is now is to cover all that you need to cover and give room for us to explore together, right? What exactly do we need to do? What exactly do we need to know? What exactly do we need to pay attention to? Now, the purpose here is basically to explain the importance of having a reliable IT operations and the robustness of business reliance or resilience. Sorry. Now, the exam focus for your domain 4, it constitutes 26% of the CISA exams, and 26% of 150 questions is actually, I think it comes to like that 39. Quick validation. Yes, it comes to 39 questions. Now, for the learning objectives, we would want to review critical IT processes. We want to be able to assess the IT controls for operations, continuity, disaster recovery. I think one of the questions, I think the questions we solved on Sunday bordered around this business continuity and disaster recovery, even though where we had some hot debate was around the database side of things, but still on ensuring business continuity and disaster recovery. Then we should also be able to understand what are the methodologies for business impact and risk assessment. How do we go about carrying out a good risk assessment of IT infrastructure, basically? Now, the domain is broken down into two sections and a total of 16 subsections, right? So the section A, or part A, which has to do with information system operations, has 11 components or 11 subsections. Now, the section B, which speaks to business resilience, has 5 sections. So we'll quickly just look at, just go through them and then we'll move on. Now, for your part A, we have IT components. We have IT asset management. We have job scheduling, production process automation. We have system interfaces. I think the example I used was the 4.5, which was end user computing and shadow IT. All right. Then the section 6 or the subsection 6 is system availability capacity management. Now, you agree with me, no matter how skilled your IT personnel are, if you have poor capacity management, it will lead to, I mean, a lot of downtime or long downtime because your system resources get exhausted and you're unable to meet future requests to your system by your customers. And that is not good for business because every time you're down, for every minute you're down, you're losing money. You're losing a potential client. All right. So system availability and capacity management is something that it's a big deal when it comes to IT system operations. Now, IT change management, configuration and patch management, these are things that are important when it comes to our IT environment. I think one of the questions we solved on Sunday spoke about what should be done when you initiate an emergency response. You're not following the traditional change management process. We said that an approval is not required immediately. However, you should go back and get the approval of your management posthumous or post activity. All right. When there's an emergency, you can't wait to call the MD or the EDs to get approval or your change management board to get approval for a change that needs to happen to stop a bleeding of funds. Rather, you take that initiative, take that action first, stop the bleeding, then engage the stakeholders, your change management board, then get their approval. And I think one of the options that was there was saying that should the change management board give a blanket approval for all emergency changes even before they happen? And we said the answer to that option was no, because you can't you shouldn't delegate your responsibility. The essence of the change management board is for oversight. You want to be able to know what happens on your system, and it has to be approved and authorized. Where it's not authorized, it has to be reviewed and then authorized post action. All right. So those are conversations that we had last Sunday, even if we've not gone through the manual then, but we were still able to discuss it. All right. Then operational log management. How do we manage logs of operations? All right. And we would see that for us as auditors, logs are your best friends. All right. They are the ones that hold the secrets and what do you call it now? The secret whispers, right, of the organization. Everything you do, one way or the other, there is a trace somewhere. That trace will be called a log. All right. You log into the system. And when you're logging into the system, your system connects to the internet. It goes through the DHCP server. It gets an IP address through the DHCP server. There's a DNS server that is resolving the host name or the website page name to IP address and then to your ones and your zeros. And so there are traces, everywhere. So for us as auditors, being able to maximize or leverage on those logs or those traces in doing our investigation or carrying out an assessment would be one of your greatest tools. Then you have IT service level management. We all work in one corporate organization or the other. IT service level management basically speaks to a promise to the IT customers, to the customers of the IT department, that we are going to ensure that your tools, your systems are working as they should. There are no hiccups, there are no issues, things are working the way they are supposed to. If there are any issues, it will be resolved within the next 5 hours. So that's where your IT SLA comes in, the SLA with various business units. Now, depending on the criticality of the services that they offer to different units, it will also determine the service level agreement, or between IT and those teams. Okay, then you now went further to, in this information system operations, we would now look at, okay, database management. Now, in the exam is not going to test you on if you know how to create a database, or if you know how to query a table, or if you know how to relate tables together and join tables together and do, comprehensive queries, or even write a database program. All right. But it just wants to know if you understand the basic concept of your database. As a relational database, or if it's a flat file. All right. You understand the concept. It also wants to know, okay, if you understand the principles upon which your database functions. And in the Sunday session, we talked about the ACID principle. And even when we check the Google LM, checking through our manual, it also referred us to where the ACID principle is in our manual, which basically states that, your transaction is either complete or not complete. There are no middle ways, and there are no checkpoints permitted, at least on the database level. When it comes to the application, yes, you can have checkpoints for the flow or the workflow of the application. Now, that being said, these are the 11 things that are covered in the part A of information system operations. Now, in the part B, where we talk about business resilience, we are looking at business impact analysis, our BIA. All right. When you want to do your BIA, you can't do your BIA without a risk assessment, because when you're saying what's the impact of this risk if it crystallizes to our organization. All right. For us to be able to assess the impact, the business impact, we need to be able to, first of all, everything starts with identification of your assets. You need to be able to identify all your assets. All right. And then once you've identified your assets, you need to be able to classify those assets correctly. Are they high-risk assets? Do they contain sensitive information? The information that they hold, are they GDPR sensitive information, like personally identifiable information about your customers? If they are, how do you handle them? Now, yes, Nigeria, we might not be affected by GDPR, but if your customers you have customers that are based in the EU or are citizens of the EU, indirectly you would be affected by the GDPR. And even if they are not, and they are Nigerian citizens, we've been told that NDPR is already enforced. So there is the adoption of the GDPR, the local content or the local version of it, and they have the body that drives that even in the nation. Okay, so we want to know, when you talk about your business impact analysis, you need to be able to identify the asset, you need to be able to classify the asset properly, you need to be able to identify the risk that are associated with that particular assets. All right, and then what is the implication? How much is it going to cost us in finances, reputation? So basically, physical and tangible and non-tangible losses needs to be accounted for. Then the second aspect of the business resilience, you look at system and operational resilience. How do we build system resilience? How do we build operational resilience? When we talk about system resilience, you're talking about having failover services. All right. You don't have just only one for a bank. You don't have just only one core banking application server. You want to have multiple, so that if one of the servers fail, the 2 or 3 more continue serving your customers. All right. You build redundancies into your core assets. Now, when it comes to operational resilience, you're trying to eliminate risk like key man risk. So you want to ensure that at least 2 or more persons can carry out a function, so that if one person is out of is unable to carry out the services he or she does due to either sickness or being disgruntled or just left and went for another job, you are not left high and dry. And that's why also we always recommend things like your SOP, all right, standard operating procedural manual, so that the knowledge on how to run the functions and and provide services to our customers are not just in the head of one person, but it's been documented clearly, so that anybody who picks up the book can read it and run with it and be able to carry out those functions as they should have. So no matter how experienced you are, maybe you are the best database administrator in the world. When you get to a new organization, you have to pipe down and learn. You might be able to walk around Oracle database, MySQL database, or even Microsoft SQL database. Fantastic. But if you don't know where those databases are in terms of their IP address, their IP addressing, you don't know the credentials the master credentials or the database administrator credentials that you need, or you, God help you, the DBA has left. You are the new DBA. There's no other person that's managing database. So that means database is just there. If they off that server, we are in trouble. And now, I think it's something that you should also take back home to your various organizations, at least those of us that are in the IT audit space. You need to check, because in some cases, there are some systems that have not been turned off for even maintenance purpose, because they know if they turn it off to restart some of the services like the database services on those systems, they will not be able to, because there are no proper documentation and the persons who had access to it are no longer in the system. So in order to build operational resilience, these are pockets of issues that we would need to deal with. Then the third thing here talks about your data backup, storage and restoration. All right. Depending on the organization, what your policies are, you can stagger your data backup plan, whichever way you choose. Either you backup incremental, do incremental backup every day, then once a week you do a full backup. All right, and then once a month you do another full backup. So you have full backup for the end of the week, full backup at the end of the month, and then one full backup at the end of the year. Or you can be doing full backup every day, even though it's not doesn't sound reasonable because it costs more. All right, and it takes longer time. Okay, so but whatever the strategy is your IT team is using, you need to be able to know and then judge if it suffices or if it meets the organizational need. Now, one thing I've mentioned before, and I think I need to mention again is when we're doing our audit assessments, you need to always judge what actions IT is doing in line with best practice, yes, but more importantly, in line with what is our strategic objective as an organization. Is the actions IT taking pushing us in the direction of the strategic objective of management, or taking us in the opposite direction? A lot of times it's easy for us to just just be laid back. Just be laid back. We feel, okay, yeah, IT, they know what they are doing, so they are okay. But it's possible IT, yes, they spend money, buy new things, buy new toys, but it's not the direction management wants. So even if there are good initiatives that they are putting in place, if it's not in line with the overall management objective, then there is something wrong. So there needs to be some form of course correction. Now, the fourth thing we would look at here is your business continuity plan. Business continuity plan. So basically, when you talk about your business continuity plan, you're looking at, okay, how can we ensure that we are continually in business? Why the disaster recovery plan is the worst case scenario. When things have gone wrong, when the stuff has hit the fan and everywhere is messy and it seems like there will be no tomorrow for the company, that's where your disaster recovery plan is. That's where it comes forth, where you now start talking about your hot site, your warm site, your cold site, because it's after a disaster. It might also involve relocation of key staff. So basically, these are preemptive planning. All right. Before, I mean, and you also see that it could also be called scenario planning. This is planning for scenarios that has not occurred and might never occur. Now, if you check the risk register of organizations, you will see some ridiculous risks that have been mentioned. But when it comes to identifying and assessing risk, associated with our business operations, our IT operations, and our business going concern, there are no stupid risks. There are no stupid concerns. They are just concerns. And for each concern, we need to be able to give satisfactory response, put in satisfactory measure to ensure that we can still continually be in business. So when it comes to the disaster recovery plan, it's actually after a disaster. All right. For business continuity, maybe after an incident or a problem that has occurred, you want to be able to bounce back and ensure that you continue to do what you're doing. But for disaster recovery, it's a total shutdown of your primary site most times, and then you're kickstarting at a secondary site or doing something, what do you call it now? Either co-location or reciprocal agreement. It's another approach when it comes to disaster recovery plan. So the reciprocal agreement, I mean, don't mind me, I've told you I'll rant a little bit or speak a little bit more when we're on this section, just to help us gain context. And by the time we get into those areas individually, it becomes easier because you've heard it before. So we're just gisting, right? So when you talk about the reciprocal agreement, basically it's between two companies that do similar functions. So like an MTN and a Glo having a reciprocal agreement, or an FCMB and a First Bank having a reciprocal agreement, or maybe or maybe GT and a First Bank having a reciprocal agreement. Basically, we're saying that if for any reason First Bank gets hit, or there is an attack on First Bank and a critical infrastructure cannot come up, you, GTB, would allow us, yes, at a cost, to run our skeletal services from your infrastructure. Okay. And then if same thing happens to us in GT, you, First Bank, will allow us to run our skeletal services from your premises for the time being. Yes, possibly at a cost. So this is a type of approach when it comes to your disaster recovery plan. I mean, so when you talk about these things, it's basically you're doing scenario planning. If this happens, what do we do? If that happens, what do we do? All right. So those are things just to consider. And those are the 16 aspects or areas of your domain 4 or subsections. Yeah. Any questions so far? I mean, I don't think I've said anything too much at this point, but is it clear so far? Instead of any question, is it clear so far? Even if no question. Let's proceed then. All right, let's look at the learning objectives and task statements, and then hopefully we'll delve in more. So at the end of the session, or at least studies and then the classes, one should be able to conduct an audit in accordance with ISO audit standards and a risk-based ISO audit strategy. Now, basically, when you talk about your risk-based ISO audit strategy, before now, we do audits per area, we do audit per business process and the likes. All right, but the truth is, not all audits are equally important. Some audits are more important than the others. Some areas of audit are more important than other areas. So we need to be able to judge carefully and determine which areas of audit requires our utmost attention compared to others. So those are things you want to look at when you're looking at your risk-based ISO audit. So which of the aspect of our businesses has the highest risk? And the truth is, the answer always is almost always the same across board. The goose that lays the golden egg, right? The business process that contributes most to our bottom line. And that will now lead us to most times the core business applications, core banking application, core insurance application, core consulting application, whatever industry you are in. All right. So, but being able to identify that your crown jewel, that golden goose, all right, that lays the golden egg is very, very important. So that you pay more attention to that, ensure that all the security controls that need to be in place is in place even for that. All right. And then in such cases, you find out that such critical applications, you are reviewing it either every quarter or twice a year, while other processes you're reviewing just once a year. Okay. So it's important for us to be able to do a risk-based IS audit assessment. Now, evaluate roles and or impact of automation and or decision making for an organization. Today, AI has become a big deal. It's a big deal. It's a big deal. Um, for the employers of Microsoft, it's not so much fun because most of the guys that were laid off recently are the guys that built the AI that replaced them. All right. So, in as much as we don't like or we want to shy away from technology, it's unavoidable. All right. So we need to be able to, as an RS auditor, evaluate the role and the impact of automation. What aspect of our business have we automated? What's the impact? Does it lead to more productivity? Does it lead to a lot of redundancies? How does it work for us? All right. And how does it align to how does it help in making decisions for the organization? Do we need more human resource? Do we need less human resource? These are things that you as an auditor will be involved in. Now, just a food for thought for us all here. In as much as we cannot, I mean, the genie is out of the box. Technology is out there. Doing automation is out there. It's become as easy as possible right now. The question is, how familiar are you? How versatile are you with the use of the AI technologies, with the use of the various automation tools out there? All right. The person who is knowledgeable in AI, knowledgeable in building efficiencies into the system would always be valuable. All right, because you need to always be a step ahead. If not, you'll be left behind as an individual. So my encouragement for us is let's be committed, let's stay committed to continuous learning. Let's stay committed to critical thinking. Let's stay committed to pushing ourselves beyond our known limits, because that way, even though technology is taking over jobs, you would always be a great asset because they know that you know how to leverage technology to do things better. All right. But now, in terms of the exam, you as an IS auditor would be required to assess these automation technologies, your AI. Now, I think it was last week I mentioned to us that ISACA has a new certification. I think is CAAIA Certified Advanced Artificial Intelligence Auditor. Now, this is something I got. I think the manual. I want to read for it. I intend to write the exam. But the reason why I'm writing it is not because it's not because I'm going to get a salary raise or would get promoted, but I'm actually trying to position myself for the rain that is coming. and that is anyone, today is IT audit. It all started from the financial audit, right? I think I've said it before in this class that the people that brought IT audit to Nigeria were actually accountants. All right, and that's because they saw that providing assurance to management has gone beyond just the financials. Even regulatory wise, you're expected to also put your cybersecurity posture and some other technical information on your annual report right now. All right, so we saw there was a gap that the financial auditors saw, and they latched on it. Enhanced themselves, and they became the first IT auditors that was in this country. Now we are at the precipice of another change where technology it now goes beyond just the things you can see, your hardwares, and the softwares. Now you're talking about artificial intelligence, neuroscience, and data science, and all of that. So whoever is going to be able to position him or herself to be able to provide that assurance on these neural systems, you would have the job of the future. All right. So now we're talking about IT audit. In the next 5 to 10 years, there'll be more around artificial intelligence audit, um, auditing that particular system, auditing how the LLM was set up, how it works, the controls around it, how how correct the LLM is working, the percentage of true data and hallucinated information within our data sets. So there is a whole lot that's coming up. So for me, I'm just saying it here. So anyone who is interested can also dream that dream and go after it, maybe after the CISA exam. It's just to say that after now, yes, you would have achieved your IT audit status, but the next step is also to look at being an auditor for the artificial intelligence systems when the time comes. All right, that being said, another learning objective here is evaluate IT strategy for alignment with organizational strategies and objectives. I think I've mentioned the fact that no matter how much investment we make in our IT environment, if it doesn't align with organizational strategic objectives, then we're in trouble. And that's where we come in. Management relies on auditors, and you can imagine auditors as the arm upon which the king rests his head, and waiting for you to nod your head to say, okay. I mean, practically that's what happens. Today, before the management signs off big bucks, they say send it to the auditor to review. They are sending to the auditor to review not because they love the auditor, but it's basically sharing responsibility and liability. So being an auditor, yes, it's fancy, yes, it's cool. All right. You're close to power and the men in power. But the reason why they need you there is to be able to be the voice of reasoning where they become unreasonable. All right. Because every time they sign off any project or any money, if it was reviewed by an auditor, when there are issues, the MD would tell you that audit reviewed it, so somebody in audit will be held responsible for not doing a proper job, because the truth is no one expects the MD to know all things. Okay, so when it comes to IT spend, IT strategy, part of our job as an IS auditor would be to see if the strategy aligns with the overall organizational strategy and objectives, and how we are going to contribute to help the organization achieve its goal. Now, evaluate the organization's management of IT policies and practices, including compliance with legal and regulatory requirements. So, questions around how do we implement IT policies and practices? Of a truth, I've been in different organizations over a few years. And one thing I can tell you is there's hardly any organization you will ask about their IT policy who will not have an IT policy. what you would see is that a lot of people have IT policies, they have procedural documents, but they are not following it. There is no enforcement. All right. There is no enforcement. You say, okay, clean desk policy. Never write your password on sticky notes. Don't do this. Don't do that. USB is not permitted for use within our organization, but yet people are using it. The controls that have been put in place are failing, or people are sabotaging it intentionally. So we need to be able to evaluate how the management of IT policies and its practices are being handled within our organization. Then next is determine whether the organization has defined ownership of IT risk, controls, and standards. In my previous job role, one of the things that I did was more or less risk assessments for automotive products, all right, their risk. And part of the things we check for is who owns this risk. You can't have a risk without an owner. It's just like having, how do I put it, a car without a key, or saying that this is what we want to do and nobody, I mean, this is, okay, you've heard this kind of stuff. This is what we've decided to do, but it's not assigned to one person. It will never get done. All right. I mean, it's because nobody, you need to assign responsibility to somebody. Now, the person might not be the one to get the work done. He can choose to delegate it to the foot soldiers, those that will do it. But when it comes to accountability, that senior person or that person who has been assigned that responsibility will be held accountable. So accountability is very, very important. All right. And that's why when it comes to IT risk, somebody should take ownership of it. It can be the CTO, it can be the CIO, depending on the organizational structure. It can be, I mean, it can be anybody, all right, within the IT leadership that's assigned that risk. But somebody has to own the risk, because that person will be held responsible of ensuring that that risk is properly managed. And when it comes to management of risk, you have major four approaches that can be utilized. You talk about your preventive, putting in preventive measures to reduce the risk. All right. All right. You can either reduce the risk by putting in some controls that would reduce the likelihood of that risk occurring. You can choose to accept the risk. That means you have a defined risk appetite that has not been exceeded. I mean, in my previous world in the bank, when I used to manage the what do you call it now, the fraud team, one of the things that I always try to extract from the product owners that we help monitor their customer activities is what's your risk appetite. It's going to determine how we protect or monitor the activities, what activities should be of importance to us. All right. So if you don't have a huge risk appetite, then the monitoring has to be very tight. But if you have a huge risk appetite, you can just focus on the big ticket kind of fraud, while the other small ticket ones, you know that under our risk appetite, we can always refund the money. And in the lifetime of my bank, there has been several refunds that happened, right? And those refunds, a lot of times is because we can prove that the customer did anything wrong. But a lot of times also, we've also been able to establish that um, the customer was negligent, or the customer divulged an information that they shouldn't have divulged, and which led to the fraud, especially when it comes to mobile banking, internet banking, and you say there's a fraud. We know that the controls we have in place require, I mean, for it to be successful, there should have been an OTP sent. Now, if that OTP was sent to you and as a customer you gave it to someone who claims to be from the bank, at that particular point, the liability shifts. And one of the terms that I heard so much in those 6 to almost 7 years on that desk is liability, managing liability, liability shift. The goal is always about where does the liability lies? Are we liable? Is the customer liable? I mean, can we sue the other bank? What can we do? All right, it's always about liability. So the idea here is this: if the IT risk are not assigned to a particular owner, that's a major problem. That's a major problem for us. Okay, so it has to be assigned. Evaluate the organization's ability to continue business. So if your core business application is being bombarded by an attacker, I mean, a form of denial of service attack, right? What's the likelihood of you being able to recover? What's the likelihood of you being able to stay in business? All right. All right. That's talking about your business continuity. I mean, being able to continue to do your business, irrespective of the stones thrown at you, irrespective of the barrage of attacks you're getting. All right. Yes, one of your system got ransomware attack. All right, but you have controls in place to limit the spread of that attack. And then you've also been able to curtail it in such a way that there are no exfiltration of data, so there are no data breach in essence. And then you have put in measures in place to ensure that your backup data can be readily as available and restored. Okay, and then you have good technical guys, both red team, blue team, who is able to do a root cause analysis to be sure that the weaknesses that the attacker exploited to gain access to your system has been blocked. Because if they could enter once, they can enter once again, especially if we do not find out what the root cause is. All right. So it's important that yes, we're able to evaluate our ability to bounce back, all right, or ensure that we continue to do business, irrespective of the kind of attacks that come to us as an organization. Um, Evaluate the organization's storage, backup, and restoration policies and processes. Recall when I was talking about the backup, I said it depends on the organization in question, all right, because for some organizations they might not need to do backup as frequently as some others, and the way it's going to be distributed, some might want to do full backup every day, and I said it's expensive and time consuming. But for some, you they might decide, okay, we're going to do partial, no, sorry, not partial, differential backup. That is, um, instead of doing the whole backup of everything, you just take what has changed between the last time you did backup and now. It's just that difference that will be done. All right. And that's very, very much more faster. So for that, it depends on your organizational policy. And so that's why it's important for us to be able to review the backup and restoration policies and process for adequacy. I mean, you need to critique the policies and the processes in place to be sure that if something goes wrong today, will we be able to recover based on the backups, I mean, schedule that we have? What's the allowable data loss? And I think when we were discussing it last week Sunday, we call it RPO, recovery point objective. That's the allowable data loss. Then our RTO, recovery time objective, it talks about the time perspective. How long can we afford to stay down before it becomes more, I mean, before it becomes no longer acceptable. Okay, so the RPO RTO spoke from the data point, data perspective, and the time perspective. Now, we need to be able to evaluate whether IT vendor selections and contract management processes meet business, legal, and regulatory requirements. You and I know that it's a little bit difficult, especially when you have your management as a subsidiary that they want to offer the business to. In all fairness, you won't be able to do a comparative analysis that makes sense. I've been involved at least once or thereabout in IT purchase steering committee where we're looking at, okay, what's your price? What are you offering? I mean, we have given our requirement specifications, so we're judging against that. And then you're looking at the cost, looking at how long you've been in business. We're looking at the expertise you have in your team to be able to carry out that job so that you won't leave us hanging and the likes. And we're also looking at, okay, where else in the industry have you implemented this thing that we're talking about? Okay, so these are just a few things that you would be considering when you're looking at your vendor selection, contract management. When you're doing this, also especially in the contract management side of things, you always say, okay, yeah, we're going to give this contract, but you need to sign an NDA, a non-disclosure agreement that would state that you're not allowed to share whatever sensitive information that you've been privy to by virtue of working with us and things like that. So as I mean, the legal team, they are good. They know how to draft those documents very well. It's for us to point them in the right direction of what we expect. Now, the other thing here is being able to evaluate supply chains for IT risk and integrity issues. When we talk about the supply chain review, it's very, very important because if you remember, there was this big data breach in the US that affected practically almost all the big companies. SolarWind. SolarWind is a tool that is being used for network monitoring and all of that. But their organization was breached and the attacker was able to, I think, inject some malicious code into their system so that they were able to take over um, the systems of the companies that are subscribed to their services. It was a big blow for SolarWind. I'm not sure if they've recovered yet because I've not really been hearing much of them in the market. I mean, they had even government contracts and all of that. So, but can imagine that after that particular incident, I'm sure they would have lost a lot of the government security contracts that they had. All right. So there are some risks that you cannot afford to allow to crystallize, and that's an example is your supplier management risk, your supply chain. So you want to be able to, because there's this saying that you're strong as your weakest link, and your supplier will have a link to you. You have linked to your customers. So if your customer is breached, you can introduce that malicious stuff into your own network, and you can treat to the supplier network, and vice versa also applies. So what is expected here is that there is a comprehensive IT risk assessment of both the supplier and how it would impact us as an organization, and then take steps to mitigate those risks. And where it cannot be eliminated, we try to reduce it to an acceptable level. All right, so it's very, very important that we are aware of the risks that are associated with the supply chain management. We should also be able to evaluate whether effective processes are in place to support end users. A lot of times, the end users are at the end of our mind. They are not the first on. They are not the first on our mind. I mean, as an IT person, we are just thinking about I need to provide this solution. I need to do this. I need to do that. But we forget that whatever you're doing, there is an end user that will consume it. All right. So it's always important that we have processes in place to support these end users. We have, because if not, they will likely fall prey to the wrong sets of people and then expose the organization unnecessarily. So we need to pay attention to our end users and ensure that there's adequate support for them in case there are questions that need to be answered. We need to be able to evaluate whether IT service management practices align with organizational requirements. We need to be able to evaluate whether IT operations and maintenance practices support the organization's objective. So you can see us going back to organization's objective. When we solve questions, you would also find that a lot of times we are always pointing back to the origins. Like you're saying, don't forget where you're coming from. It's like saying, don't forget that everything you're doing as an IT person, you don't exist on your own. Your existence is to serve the overall organizational goal. All right. So we have to always have that at the back of our mind. Next, we need to be able to evaluate the organization's database management practices. How do we manage our database? Evaluate the data governance program. ISACA has this certification of Certified Data Privacy Security Engineer. It focuses more on the data governance side of things. But then when it comes to data governance, basically we're looking at how do we manage our data lifecycle from the moment it is being created by collation from our customers to how it's being utilized, to how it's being stored, how it's being recalled, all right, or reused, to how it will be destroyed when no longer to be used. That's what your data governance is all about. So we need to put in measures, controls, we need to put in means of identifying, ensuring that proper controls are in all of these phases of the data lifecycle, right? Now, one of the things that your Module 5 we will talk about is the kind of protections you can have for data in transit, data in use, data at rest. I don't know if I mentioned it, but I think either last week I mentioned it in passing. We talk about the three different states of data. All right, it's similar to the three different states of water. Water is water, but it can be in different states. You can have you can have water as solid, which is ice block, as liquid, which is your water, or as gas, which would be your steam. All right. Now, the same way, your data can be in the solid state, that is, it's just at rest, no shaking. All right. It can be in transit, and it can be in use. All right. So that those three different states, you have different controls that can be put in place. Your database controls can take care of the data at rest. Data in use, things like your HTTPS, your SSL, your VPN, encrypting your packets. All right. Those are securing your data in transit when they are moving from one point to the other. Then when you talk about data in use, you now talk about memory protection mechanisms. How do we ensure that the data in memory that you're using cannot be accessed by an unauthorized process within the system? All right. Now, the technicalities of all of these are not required for the exam. All right. So, but it's good to just know that these are different states of your data. Now, evaluate the organization's problem and incident management program. The difference between a problem and an incident, a problem is just an incident that keeps reoccurring. All right, it keeps reoccurring. All right, so an incident is just basically something that is not working or something that's failed to work. An incident, for example, when I first resumed, I got an incident notification from my security team saying that my system had a vulnerable Python library. Now, I haven't dabbled much into Python, but I I started my career at least in the banking as an IT support person. So at least I know my way around the system a little bit. All right, and I searched, I checked the what do you call it now? The installed applications, no Python. I searched through the system and I noticed, okay, there are some Python libraries I could see. All right. So I reached out to the IT support guys. I said, guys, I didn't install any Python. This is the system you just gave me. So it's either it's been there before I came or whatever, but check. They also checked the places I checked. They didn't see it. They escalated it higher. But I told them, I gave them a screenshot of what I could see. So finally, an IT person with a privileged right was able to now do a remote session into the system. And now I pointed into the files that I saw and I was able to delete it and it was out. So after that, I've not gotten any issues. Now, the truth is, after that, I actually have installed the Python library because I needed it for a work I wanted to do. But then it's the most recent one, so it's not a vulnerable Python library. So it wasn't as if Python was wrong, but it was just the fact that it was an old vulnerable Python library that they saw on the system then. Now that being said, so that for me was an incident. Now, if that particular incident now happened to be common for 5 or 10 users, then it should be a problem because if everybody is saying, ah, you guys are seeing vulnerable Python on our systems, but none of us installed it, then there's a problem. So it means that either an attacker has already gained a foothold in our network and compromising systems one after the other. I mean, dropping malicious payloads as they go. All right, then that's a problem. So they need to find the root cause. But when it's just an incident, you just want to cure it and go. Like when you say, I'm having headache, or you go to pharmacy, pharmacy just give you Panadol, you drink and you go. But if the headache persists and you go see your doctor, they will need to do, I mean, comprehensive scan, do tests, check if it's migraine, what kind of migraine it is. All right. So when it comes to incident and problems, your problem is basically prolonged incidents or incidents that has occurred in several people that is not going anywhere. All right. But for an incident, it's just an issue that you can easily solve. But when it comes to a problem, you need to get to the root cause for you to actually address it properly. So for us as IS auditors, we would need to be able to evaluate problem and incident management programs within our organization. What's the procedure like? What's the program like? How do we handle these things? Now, when we talk about programs, they don't have to be complicated. It can be a 1 page or even 2 page program, but it just says stating this is how we would work when there is an incident, and this is how we will work when there is a problem. These are the escalation paths, especially when it comes to problems. I mean, the only time I ever got a query since I started working, which is, I mean, some years now. I say some years, at least more than 15 years, yeah. More than 50 years going, more than 15 years going to 20, if I'm correct. Now, I got a query only once, and the reason why I got the query was not because I did anything wrong, but the only thing I did wrong is that I did not inform my superiors on time about an incident. I mean, I worked in a high pressure environment. The good thing is that my temperament was able to handle it because I'm the kind of person who chooses not to be worried or bothered. I mean, it's the worst case scenario we're always dealing with. Worst case, we'll not get the money back. I mean, we've had frauds of 1 billion, hundreds of millions. I mean, one thing I always told my team was ensure that you do your best and you do everything you need to do according to the process. That way, nobody can hold me responsible for, I mean, a loss personally, because we've done all that we were meant to do. and the loss was not because of us. So we always make sure that we gave it our best and don't take things too personal when it comes to the job there. So the only time I got a query on the job, which they said they will put in my file, even if I never saw the file, I don't know if they did or not, was because there was a fraud. It was even like, I mean, it was maybe, it was money from one of the government parastatal accounts was being taken. I mean, the fraudster sent, what do you call it now? A fraudulent instruction to the account officer who did not do some due diligence. And then by the time it was going, I mean, they got to know that it was fake. The money has been disbursed or has gone already. And for us, it was just to be chasing after the money to know where exactly it went. And when you are under such a high pressure to track these funds, it's not the time to start talking with management. I mean, I know how to play both sides. I mean, the operation side, management side, but there's a time for everything. So the time wasn't right for to start calling meetings and saying this is what happened. The idea was try to find out how much can we even recover, and then we would reach out to management to say, okay, this is what has happened, and this is where we are. Because I know that anytime you call them in before the time, it always detracts because you would always have to be doing one meeting or the other, asking for updates. I mean, but then the idea is you need to ensure that there is a proper program management documentation in place that is being followed. It's one thing to have the documentation, it's another thing to follow it. All right. Then evaluate organization's log management program. How do we manage logs? What's our log retention plan? Do we have different log retention plan depending on the sensitivity and criticality of the assets in question? Are there regulatory requirements for log retention for a particular data type? For example, for bankers, I think you're supposed to maintain bank transaction records for up to 10 years, according to CBN. All right. And after that, anybody that is calling for a bank transaction detail after 10 years, if you can't provide it, the bank cannot be held liable in any way. I mean, it's gone past the time that's allowed for a recall. All right, so that's one thing. So for us, it drove a particular initiative. What was it called now? Data. It was a program basically where digitalization of our physical documents. All right, we're going paperless. So we had this tool that the organization bought, the bank bought industrial scanners and placed them in branches and a particular central location where we're just scanning and archiving. It was called archiving project then, though. Scanning and archiving these old documents. For us, we acquired several banks. I mean, it was a small bank, but it has acquired several other banks over the years. So it was important that whatever tickets, documents, customer file folders that we have, that it should be digitalized and be readily available, all right, for access if the need arises. Then we even got a warehouse somewhere in around Mowe where they would now keep the physical document for at least, I think the goal was to even exceed the CBN 10 years to maybe 15 years or more. That's the kind of capacity that was put in place so that if anything comes up, any litigation, we can easily go to the warehouse where the files are and be able to recover the physical file, even though we have those files also scanned in the system, the soft ones. All right. That's that on log management. Evaluate organizations' policies and practices related to asset lifecycle management. Asset lifecycle management. So one of the things you find out is, I mean, we have Ben, our accountant, or at least the financial auditor. You know that for your assets, both IT and non-IT assets, it has a depreciating value, and it's always been depreciated over a certain number of years, depending on the class of asset it is. All right, so it's always good for us to be able to evaluate our organization's policies on the practices that when it has to do with your IT asset life cycle. And there are some IT assets. Yes, it makes sense that okay, just to be able to write off the cost, you depreciate it over a shorter period of time, right? But then the fact that it's fully depreciated doesn't mean it's outside your infrastructure. It will still be in use until either it's bad and you need to replace it or upgrade it, whatever the case may be. So, but the idea is you need to know what is our organization's position, what's the management policy on how to handle your IT asset lifecycle management. Then we need to be able to evaluate risk associated with shadow IT, the end user computing, and determining effectiveness of compensating controls. At the beginning of the class, I mentioned a little bit more on the shadow IT. I told you it's just more like see it as a reflection IT. Your shadow is not the real you, but is a copy of you. All right. So when you say shadow IT, it's not the real IT infrastructure, but a shadow of it. So you can have tools that are not authorized within your organization now being used in your organization. I give an example of how easy it is to even get these things within your organization because your organization uses OneDrive or Google Drive as their official storage. All right. So if they enable those drives, then you can also open your own personal drive of such and then copy tools that does not require installation. Today, a lot of tools are portable in nature. I mean, all you need to do is just extract the .exe file as if you're unzipping it and you have access to both the file and all the libraries it needs to work without installation. Okay, that being said, I mean, before I move on from there, the goal is not just to tell us, okay, this is how you can do it. We need to be able to come up with compensating controls. How do we know that there is a shadow IT in place? One of the things that you need to be concerned about is the shadow IT can expose you unnecessarily. You have things like there's this remote software tool. Attackers use them a lot. This stuff has escaped my mind. When I remember, I'll tell us. But basically, it's a remote software tool to have an RDP connection to a system. It doesn't require installation. It's just one file. All right. It just needs someone on the other side to initiate and accept the connection in some cases. All right. So it's important we know what are the things we have in our organization, what are the tools our colleagues and subordinates are using, all right, that can expose us unnecessarily, and then put in measures to stop it. All right. It might involve whitelisting the tools that are allowed, which means that any tool that is not on the whitelist is automatically blocked, either it's a good tool to use or a bad tool. The expectation is if there's any tool that you want to use within the organization that is not approved on the whitelist, you make a justification for why it should be allowed, and then somebody would approve it if they find the justification reasonable. Okay. One of the other challenges is this: a lot of organizations will face fines from regulatory bodies for issues of privacy, piracy and the likes, all right, because you're using unlicensed tools in a corporate organization. There are some tools that, if you check them, they're allowed for an individual to use as an individual, but the moment you use it for corporate work, then that's where the problem is. So we need to be careful because that way we're able to protect our organization, our reputation, the reputation of our organization, and also stop the bleeding, help the organization to avoid unnecessary settlement fees especially due to presence of unauthorized or unlicensed softwares within our organization. Now that being said, we need to be able to evaluate the organization's threat and vulnerability management program. How do we manage vulnerabilities? Do we do threat hunting? Is it passive? Is it active? Do we go actively after it or just passively? These are programs that they are not difficult to establish. It's just, document and then assign responsibility and then build processes around it. Today, we have processes around patch management, identifying when there is a new patch, what we do. But within that same program, you can even extend it to your vulnerability management to say, okay, yes, we know that Microsoft has what you call your Patch Tuesday. All the vendors have the days of the month or the week where they give their patches. All right. You monitor those actively. The other thing is you have tools that you can use in scanning your application, scan your website, scan your systems, all right, to see, is there a weakness that is already known to the World Wide Web? Is there a weakness that is already publicly known? All right, even yeah, because if it's not publicly known, then most likely your tool will not be able to identify. Those are the kind of vulnerabilities that are called zero-day vulnerabilities. All right, so you want to have a process in place that will help you monitor the performance of your systems, your application, and if there are any weaknesses or threats that have been identified, you're notified immediately, and then you put in a process to manage that particular risk. Either you're accepting it if it's within your appetite, or you control it, or you transfer it. All right, you can transfer it, maybe it's insured or something. Yeah, you can also reduce it. All right, putting measures to reduce the impact should anything go wrong. All right, so those are just some of the, approaches that can be taken when managing identified vulnerabilities and threats. Evaluate logical, physical, and environmental controls to verify the confidentiality, integrity, and availability of information assets. At the beginning of the class is not domain 5 now. The CISA class, one of the things that I discussed about with us was talking around your CIA. We said that's the bedrock, all right, the foundation of information security. Those are security properties, all right, or qualities of your secure product. We said it needs to be able to ensure confidentiality of sensitive information, integrity of the data it holds or it manages, all right, has to be clear. Then availability to authorized persons, all right, has to be there. And then we also distinguish between the logical and physical environment. All right, so your logical controls are controls that cannot be seen, like your username, password, signing in. Those are not tangible controls. They are intangible. They are abstract, but they are there. All right. Your physical controls, like your gate, your bollards, your security camera, your security guards. Those are physical controls. All right. Your environmental controls are, you have your sprinkler, you have what do you call it now? Yeah, you have your sprinkler, you have your air conditioner and all of that. Your HVAC, all right? Those are managing and controlling the environmental constituents, all right? The temperature, how cold or how hot it is. If there is a smoke, what should happen? Should you use a sprinkler? Is it a wet sprinkler, dry sprinkler? So there are different stuffs that we need to consider. So, but for us, as an IS auditor, our work is cut out for us. We need to be able to evaluate both logical, physical, and environmental controls just to verify that integrity, availability, confidentiality of the information asset is assured. All right. So that's basically everything that we are hoping to cover in terms of tax statement and objectives for this course. Like I said, the manual itself, if you check, is not too voluminous, but I'll try as much as possible just to pay more attention and give us more details. And if there are questions, please feel free to ask. All right, so let's quickly take just this one question first. So let's quickly look at this question. Say, which of the following provides the best method for determining the level of performance provided by similar information processing facility IPF environments? A, user satisfaction, B, goal accomplishment, C, benchmarking, D, capacity and growth planning. What do we think? Do we understand the question? Are there terminologies we don't understand?
Yes, please. What is information processing facility IPF environment? Because if we don't know it, then how are we going to determine the best method for the level of performance?
So your IPF is basically your data center. So it's your data center, or your IPF is a location where you have your major assets like your servers, your firewalls, your your IDS, IPS. So basically, it's like a house where you have your internal IT assets, like your critical servers, reporting servers. It's all within the data center. All right. So your IPF is basically a data center. I don't know if that helps or clarifies. I hope others are also looking at the question just as Folashade is looking at. So it's not as if it's just me and Folashade that is in class.
I think I will eliminate C and D and look into goal accomplishment.
Why?
Benchmarking, because you said the environment is actually, we are talking about data center here. So for data center, I want to believe is where we store, for example, customers' data and also the information being used for day-to-day operations. So what is the reason why we actually developed the data center? So for us to see the best method for determining level of performance, we would like to see if it's actually accomplishing the reason why the data center was put in place and also aligning it with the organization's goal as well. So that's the reason why I'm thinking we're benchmarking, capacity and growth planning might not be a good answer for determining performance. I don't know if I'm wrong, but that is just my thinking.
No, there's never, how I put it now. When it comes to thinking, I always promote us to share our thoughts. I've mentioned it here before. The goal is not to get it right.
Although it seems that I see because of that capacity, when we're talking about data center, we can also see the capacity of the data center to take more activity.
Okay. Uraola is saying she's going for C. Ben is going for C. Chidi is going for C.
Oh, okay. The odd one out.
Then it's never bad to be odd one out. I think for me, the idea is thinking through the process. You're on the right path. But when it comes to the question, let's look at the question together. I say, which one of the following provides the best method for determining the level of performance provided by similar. So that means a similar information processing facility. That means let's replace information processing facility, IPF environment, with data center. So if I replace that with your data center, the question will now read, which of the following provides the best method for determining the level of performance provided by similar data centers and similar data center environments.
Oh, okay.
So
Now I see with the word similar. So we want to compare
yes,
it with other data
you're
centers.
comparing something similar,
Okay.
something other data centers.
Mm-hmm.
All right. So if you're comparing with other data centers, user satisfaction would not suffice. All right, because your user satisfaction basically is a measure to ensure that okay, your effective processing information operation meets the user requirements. So the users that are that are querying the data center, either sending or receiving information from data center, if the speed is okay, they are getting correct information, your users are satisfied. But that's a comparison between your user requirement and then this data center operation, not data center to data center. All right. So that
Okay.
doesn't meet the objective. For
Right.
B, goal accomplishment basically evaluates the effectiveness involved. All right. In comparing performance with predefined goals. So when you talk about goal accomplishment, it means that we have a set of goal. We want this data center to be able to process 1 million transactions per minute. All right. Today we are in 990,000 transactions per minute. It hasn't accomplished its goal. The moment we hit the 1 million transaction per minute, it means it has accomplished the goal that we have set. So what we are comparing for goal accomplishment is goal set against current performance. So it's not the performance of the data center to another data center, but rather the performance of the data center to a set goal. All right, so that's why your B will be out. Then when we look at D, capacity and growth planning, all right, these are normal essentials and they are important, they are of great importance to information organization, your IT organization, right? Because of the constant technology change. I think in the course of the class, I mentioned to us that um, when it comes to capacity planning, you need to be able to plan for the future, because if not, you will find out that by the time you get to the nearest future, your storage capacity, the human capacity, all your resource, all right, can no longer meet the needs that are required now. So when it comes to capacity planning, it's the way we prepare for the future, it's the way we position ourselves to be able to cater for the future needs. So when you look at your capacity and growth planning, what it does is we're looking at where are we today, or where is the data center today, and where should it be in the next 5 years in terms of storage, in terms of processing capacity. Are we going to be using supercomputers? Before now, everything was, I like call it now, I mean, it's even difficult to come up with those terminologies again. You used to have these mainframe computers, those that had it then. I wasn't old enough to witness those years. But you used to have the mainframe computers where, to have access to computer, you have to go in front of one big machine and do all your programming there and all the likes. But today it has changed. So imagine that your mainframe was in your data center, all right? And in the next 10 years, if you're still having mainframe as your primary data storage and other things, then you are way behind and you'll be able to meet sorry, I think I've changed this in sorry. Okay, you won't be able to meet the current needs of your customers. All right. So when you look at capacity planning and growth, it's not comparing two systems or two data centers. It's comparing the current capacity of the data center as against what it should be in the next 5 years in terms of capacity and growth. Okay. But when it comes to C, benchmarking. Benchmarking basically provides a means to determine the level of performance offered by a similar company or a similar facility. So when you're benchmarking, businesses do it. MTN can benchmark against Glo, Glo can benchmark against Airtel, because they are into the same line of business. So when you want to say which of the telcos are the best, all right, in the nation, you will not be comparing telcos against banks. You'll be comparing the performance, the financials of telcos by within themselves. That's benchmarking, right? So when this question talks about performance provided by similar IPFs, it means that you're comparing one data center to another data center. All right. Is that clear? Sorry, I think. Well, actually, are we good?
Yes, it's clear. I missed out the word similar actually, so it's fine now.
Yeah. Thank you for sharing your thoughts. Let me see. Let's just take one more. Then we would. Let's see if we'll be able to handle this before. We'll just take a 5-minute stretch up. Now, which of the following would allow an enterprise to extend this intranet across the internet to its business partners? A, your virtual private network. C, client server. Sorry, B, client server. C, dial-up access. D, network service provider. So the floor is open. What are our thoughts? Please unmute yourself if you can talk where you are. If not, you can drop. When you are dropping an answer, please tell me why. I can see Chidi has put an answer in the chat. I need to know why. Can't just give me an answer and not give me why. All right, so what's our answer? Which ones are we eliminating? Why? But before we go to the why, are there any terms that doesn't make sense to you? Or any terms that you cannot discern using your layman language, English? Ura is giving me A. Yeah? Please tell me why.
Okay, so for me, it's I'm using a practical reality. If when I'm working from home, I need to turn on my VPN before I can access the company's internal resources. That's why I think it's a VPN.
Okay. But the other things, B, C, D, why do you think it might not be?
Okay, dial-up is a form of internet connection. Old something that used to be used back in the day, I think.
Olden days.
Yeah, olden days,
Yeah.
dial-up. I think using a telephone line or something, I don't know. A network service provider, it's
More right.
is that like an ISP? Like
Yes.
No more to there.
the client server is like, how do I explain client server? It's I'm not sure how to explain client server. I have a vague idea of what client server does. It's like sending and receiving. One is sending, one is receiving. But I cannot explain it to layman. But so I can confidently eliminate from what I know, BCD.
Yeah.
A, I use. So I know I have to turn on my VPN before I'm able to get into company resource. That's why I think it's a VPN.
All right. Thank you very much, Shide. Thank you very much. Well, you're trying to speak. So maybe another question I should have asked is, what's the difference between intranet and internet? Because the explanation that Chidi gave are very clear, at least to me. I think Emiza was asking for dial-up access. Your dial-up access is basically a way of gaining internet access through the telephone system, and it's an old method where you have a landline through which you gain internet access. All right, but it doesn't speak about connecting your intranet and your internet. So can anybody give me what they understand by the difference between the intranet and the internet?
Okay, so this is Folashade. I think
Yes.
With work experience also, when you work remotely, you use the VPN, which is also the intranet. So the intranet actually is private network which actually allow authorized users, whether within an organization or a community, to connect to each other, just like what Chidi said. Before you could access such documents in that particular organization, you need to use the VPN, and you need to log in with your access actually before you can access the connection for usable documentations. So which is actually support collaboration and internal communication or knowledge sharing. But when we talk about internet, is the major one that we know, which is the public one, which allow globally people to connect through devices, sharing things with each other.
Okay. All right. Thank you very much. It was an interesting explanation. I think the only place that I felt maybe you're not totally correct is your definition of intranet as VPN. They are different. So, but let me try to explain. Maybe I guess it's the same thing you're trying to say, but said in a different way.
Oh, okay.
So your intranet is your internal network. Your internet is the external network, the World Wide Web of connected devices. All right.
Okay.
But your intranet is the internal network to your organization that most times is only accessible when you are within the physical premises of your organization. Now, A is the correct answer, yes. But your A helps you to extend your internal network to your home, creating a secure communication channel over the internet. So when you're using VPN, you use VPN on the internet, right? Only that when you connect your VPN and you try to initiate connection, it secures the communication over that internet to your internal network of your organization, such that you can now access internal documents, confidential documents that are not readily available on the internet to everybody. So your virtual private network is just a way of securing the communication channel over the internet that is providing a link between your intranet to your home network or to your office laptop outside the office. Now, for the client server, basically, it's, how will I put it now? It's, I don't want to call it an architecture. It's a way of providing service. So when it comes to IT, you always have a service provider and you have the consumer. All right, you're either consuming a service or offering a service. So in the client server architecture, I think that's actually what is being called, is that you always have a client that makes requests to a server, and the server provides the service to the client. So you would always have different types of server clients. So you have a print server, you have a job server, you have a web server, you have a log server. Anything that has server in front of it provides a service. And if you're providing a service, you provide a service to a client. All right. So when you say you're sending your printing job to a print server that you want to print a file, you as the user sending the file to the printer, you are the client. The print server that manages all the printers or the printers within your floor or your organization is the print server, and it knows which printer you've chosen. It sends that job to that printer, and then you can go and print it there and collect it. All right. So your client server is actually an architecture of having a server client relationship where the server provides a service and the client consumes the service. And I've explained the dial-up process just the same way as Chidi did. as Ben did, yeah. I think it was Ben that gave me VPN. No, Chidi. Okay. Where he talked about it's a way of gaining internet access over the phone lines, but it doesn't secure communication between the internet and the intranet. All right. So it just gives you access to the internet. You can't get intranet, and your network service provider are just like your ISPs or like your Glow that allows you to gain internet access through data subscription. So a Glow, an MTN, and a Etisalat can be seen as a network service provider. You can pay for services that will allow you access the internet, but it doesn't necessarily provide you access to the intranet. But with your VPN access or VPN connection, you can have access to the intranet through the internet. I hope that's clear, everybody. We just quickly look at this one more question and then we would move on to the main course content. Now, it says the classification based on criticality of a software application as part of an IS business continuity plan is determined by A, the nature of the business and the value of the application to the business. B, replacement cost of the application. C, vendor support available for the application. D, associated threats and vulnerabilities to the application. It sounds like something we solved on Sunday, but I'm not sure. What do we think? What's the answer? And if possible, you tell me why. Chidi is saying D.
And the reason I'm going for D is, I know with IS audit, risk is always the number one thing. So whenever I see answers and I see one that relates to risk, I always go for the risk. But in this case, how do we classify how critical a software application is to a business continuity plan? A is tempting because it says the nature of the business and the value of the application to the business. That's tempting for me. But because D referring to the threats and vulnerabilities of the application, which relates to how much, how do I explain this? Risk. I go back to the word risk. That's why I'm going for D. But A is really tempting for me, but I'm just going for D because it relates to risk, which is ultimately the whole idea of IS audit, which is risk assessment and risk analysis.
Okay. Thank you for sharing your thoughts. I love the fact that A is interesting to you. So let's assume that you were able to eliminate B and C and you're left with A and A. Tosin said, okay, no. I think this is a different question. That was the previous question. All right, any other person? Do you agree, D? I'm assuming that either, okay, Ebenezer says A, why A? So you and Chidi are actually thinking alike because he also was
I think I would. Sorry, sir. I think I'll go with A. Really,
okay.
D and A for me. B and C is out of it. Really,
yeah.
I think it's clearly out of it. It's more or less like D and A, and I think the question says the classification, which is after you have identified your assets, you've classified them based on criticality of the software application as part of an IS business continuity plan, is determined by what? So I'm just trying to see it from this perspective that the type of business you also do, I think, has a major impact, particularly financial services, for instance. Most time, because I have had to deal with BCM. In fact, I remember for the department then I was like the BCM champion and all those things. So, and we had like an application whatsoever. The RTO, RPO are always very, very low. You see something like 2-3 minutes, right? So for me, I'm just trying to link it to that to say that I think
it's more of hey because the nature of the business that is being done is very, very important, right? Because in some, if it's not financial services, even manufacturing, I think it's always very high too, or it's always very, it's a pressurized environment as well. Maybe something
Yeah.
like a consulting firm, right? Do you get it might not be as what you will have probably in the financial services because you are actually facing the customer in a sense. So for me, I think the nature of the business, the underlying thing that the business is doing also play a big role, right? Because that will probably determine your continuity plan, will determine how you probably set your RTOs, your RPOs of this world will really determine it, right? If you are doing something, if I'm, for example, I'm doing a taxi business, right? Most likely, there are some things that, in fact, my business response and all this might not be as someone that is all if you relate it to people that work in the hospital, right, or in emergency and something like that, it's going to be quite different from what people that are doing something else. So I think that's just based on that I would probably go for A. D is more. It's what's it called? I agree that when you look at it from the perspective of risk, right, which is always like the key thing, right? But the nature of your business also impacts the risk you are associated with, right? And what we are trying to do here is more or less like to also mitigate that risk, right? So the first thing you need to also consider is the nature of your business before you now look at what are the associated risks. So the nature of your business is more or less like the underlying thing for me because that will now determine what type of risk, what type of threat, what type of vulnerabilities are associated with that business. So I think I would go with more of it for me. I think. Yeah. Thank you.
Okay. Okay. Thank you very, very, very much. I enjoyed your I enjoyed your analysis. All right. And I also enjoyed that of Chidi also. For me, I mean, these are the conversations you remember in your exams. The truth is, the correct answer is A. D is important, but we should never forget that everything we do is for the business. I mean, yeah, I mean, for us as IS auditor, risk is important. We're always concerned about the risk. What are the likely risks? What are the threats, vulnerabilities of the application? But in the bigger scheme of things, the risk is irrelevant if the application is not a critical application, if it doesn't house any sensitive information. And that's why when answering questions, always pay attention to the question itself. Because the question is saying the classification based on criticality of software application as part of an IS business continuity plan. All right. So we're looking at the classification of a software based on, I mean, as part of an business continuity plan. And I mean, even the name alone, business continuity plan, tells you that the concern is about the business ability to continually provide the services that it's meant to provide. So if the business no longer exists or is unable to provide the services that it's meant to provide, then no matter how high or low your threats and vulnerabilities or your risk might be, it's irrelevant. All right. So the first thing, I mean, what we need to determine, all right, I mean, this criticality is number one, what's the nature of the business? Just as Tosin told us, different business environments, their criticality or their RTO, RPOs differ. For financial services, it's very low because we know that every minute we are not up, all right, is we are losing money to both our competitors and also our brand value is depreciating. You don't want to be known as the bank that was breached. You don't want to be known as the bank that funds are not secure. That's why, I mean, if you call out most banks today, on social media, they will respond to you immediately because they know that the longer, I mean, they trend for the negative things, the worse it is for their business. So they'll rather pay you off your 5,000 or 10,000 that you are crying on than you drag them in the mud. all right, on social media. A lot of people bully banks right now on social media, and banks also have also found a way to get some of those gangsters guys in their social media platform. In some banks, they also tackle you back, all right, and some they try to be diplomatic, tell you that slide into my our DM and we'll solve it there. So the moment you mention a bank handle on Twitter and all of that, they all out because they understand the value of negative comments even to their business. So it depend. If it's for a consulting firm or a firm that really, if you like call them 100 times, they are not, their presence on social media doesn't really, is not that heavy, so they don't see it as any big deal. It's not a big deal for them. All right, so the nature of the business, all right, determines the value of the application to the business. So if it's a business where you're handling finances, then if it's an application that houses your core financial transaction, then that application becomes a critical application for you. Like one of the things you would do, as an IS auditor, is maybe a review of your business impact analysis, and that will be okay. Checking these assets that we're looking at. What is the impact if it's down? Now, the option B and C, they are valid considerations, but they are not what would determine criticality. Replacement cost of an application. Yes, it's good to know the replacement cost, but the value of an application sometimes can be higher or lower than the replacement cost. We can spend millions to build an application, but if that application is not required for us to do our day-to-day business, it's just an aesthetics, it's just an add-on. It helps us to look swaggy, or it adds some swag to our organization. It puts, it's just like saying that Twitter is down. Will banks not leave? We are using Twitter as an application for engaging customer, but if Twitter is down for 1 week, we will still survive. So the fact that we engage millions of customers on Twitter, on a regular basis per month, does not make Twitter now a critical application for our business process. All right, we can pay, millions even for subscription for the, how will I call it now? Pay premium money to subscribe to Twitter as a licensed user, and they build applications on it. But really, it doesn't make Twitter a critical application. So in the long run, the cost of replacing the application might actually even be higher than the value of that application to us as an organization. All right, but in a lot of cases, critical applications, they they are worth much more than the value of replacement, because replacing the server is not the issue. It's the fact that the number of minutes or hours it will take you to replace, the money that would have lost has even exceeded the amount we invested in acquiring that application in the first place. Then the option D, vendor support available for application. These are good things to put in place, especially when you're talking about building operational resilience, your disaster recovery plan, business continuity plan. You want to be sure that your vendors are on board. You've already done all the scenario planning, and you're saying that if something goes wrong today, will our vendors be readily available? Are there spare servers that we can get from them and start working or prepare and all of that, depending on the type of sites we want to have, either hot, warm, or cold. It will determine the level of preparedness that should have been in place before the disaster happens. Then we already discussed extensively about D. D is important, but it's not what will determine the criticality. The fact that you have more vulnerabilities or more threats on the application doesn't make that application critical. We have in the bank, we have customer, what do you call it? We have a reporting server where you have maybe general information about customer or general information about our products. The fact that that server is vulnerable or attackers are targeting it doesn't really make it a critical server for us. The fact is that if that server is down, where we get information about our products and campaign to customer, if it's down, we will not lose as much money as when our core banking or your Finacle or whatever application is being used in the bank is out of commission. All right. I think but is it clear to us why A? I think I've explained I've explained enough and might be overflogging the matter at this point. So A is our answer, but if you have any questions, feel free to ask. Just quickly introduce some of the key concepts that we have here, and then hopefully we will be able to then discuss more when next we meet. Okay, now some of the key concepts that we will be looking at here, you're looking at your IT components. When we talk about IT components, we are looking at networking infrastructure. Your router, switches, hubs are no longer allowed. I mean, and if you have any organization that still use hubs, that's disaster waiting to happen. All right, you have your firewalls, your IDS, IPS, and all your normal network appliances. All right, comes under the networking, under your IT components. And then you would have the hardwares, you have the software components, all right, that supports your IT operation. Those are the things that you would normally be discussing about when it comes under your IT components. Now, IT asset management looks at how do we go about tracking and managing IT assets to ensure that we deliver optimal utilization and we're in compliance with both organizational and statutory requirements. Okay, so IT asset management is a big deal. Now, a lot of organizations are still in the traditional way of doing things. They still keep, asset inventory just in an Excel sheet, and that Excel sheet is on one employee system. If that employee system crashed, that is the end of that list. All right. It's not in a shared location, it's not in a database, it's not in a repository that is safe. That means it's in a place where every Tom, Dick, and Harry might be able to just access it. No proper access control around it. So, when it comes to IT access management as an IT auditor, when you're reviewing it, these are things you should just pay attention to. You want to know, how do they actually track their assets? Do they have a comprehensive list of all their assets? And if you were to do a spot check on the assets that we have as an organization, will we be able to track where each asset is per time? All right. These are things that we need to pay attention to. All right. When it then comes to job scheduling, it's basically automating production processes to improve efficiency. One of the jobs that I know that is readily scheduled, or some of the jobs that you would see, I've worked in the financial industry, so permit me if I just use that as an example. One of the jobs that happen every day in every bank is end of day activities. It's actually a batch job. And basically, it's moving transaction data from one table in the database to another table in the database. And then backing up of our tapes is also a job scheduling activity that happens daily, all right, in most financial organizations. And that's because we want to build resilience and be able to recover should anything happen, all right. So when you talk about job scheduling, basically you're just automating some of your some of your processes, and sometimes it's called batch jobs. All right. Now, when it comes to system interfaces, basically this is how we look at managing risk and controls associated with system interfaces. So when you talk about system interfaces, it's a meeting point between two or more systems. So as I said, when it comes to your IT operations, your IT environment, the beautiful things you see on your screen when you log into an application is not just one application. Now you have an application server that provides you that visual picture. You have an application database somewhere that the application server speaks to. You have APIs that the application uses in calling, making calls back and forth from those databases. And they create interfaces, points of contact. So when you talk about your system interfaces, we need to be able to know what are all the system interfaces we have, what are all the APIs we have out there, what are all the services that are being consumed and being called upon out there, all right? And see, are they done securely? Or are we having services? Are we having APIs that are having hard-coded password in their methods? Or are we having APIs that are not even secure? They are just plain. I mean, anybody who can intercept the traffic will be able to read everything that it's calling forth. And do we authenticate the origin of the API calls? I mean, if you download any of the bank apps today on your mobile device, you can actually extract that application and then do a reverse engineering on it so that you'll be able to see the calls and the services it uses. Now, if that service is not protected well, an attacker will take that same service and be making calls to your database without authentication. So, as an auditor, you need to be able to check the service calls, this system interface calls from other devices. Are we authenticating the source? Are we authenticating the user agent? Are we able to know if this is from a legitimate user who has been authenticated? All right. So these are things that we need to pay attention to. Then we also have the end user computing, your mobile devices, your laptops, your desktops, your end user devices, basically. So for us as IS auditors, what we'll be concerned about is how do we manage the risk of these end user devices? Now, for our laptops, most organizations have compliance software that checks for the level of compliance of each laptop, see if it has up-to-date patches, if there is any flag or any weakness that has been identified, and I check if it's compliant or not. All right. But when it comes to the mobile device, I mean, not all organizations are big enough to invest in the MDMs or your mobile device management solutions. But I don't think the cost should be an issue because you need to protect your organization holistically. If you protect the laptops and you don't protect the mobile devices, now what happens is that if there is a vulnerability or a malware on your mobile device, you can actually transmit it to your internal network because you can access it from your mobile device and that device is not protected. All right, so it's very important that we look at the end-to-end protection of our end user computing devices. Then we talked about the shadow IT. I've mentioned it before now, basically unauthorized IT solutions used by employees. All right, and just using the layman term is just a reflection of IT, not the real IT infrastructure, but its look-alike. All right, so any question? If none, I think I'll stop here today and we would continue from this point next week. Not next week, the next time we meet. And then we'll talk about the network communications, the topologies, and then we'll see how we go from there. But what I try to achieve today is give us a holistic view of everything that we need to know about Domain 4. That's why I spend a little bit more time discussing all the tax statements and the concept. So it won't sound strange to you the next time you hear it. All right. If there are no questions, then we would end the class here for today. Okay. Thanks for having me today and enjoy the rest of your weekend. Bye.
Thank you. Bye.
Thank
All
you.
right then. Yeah, bye everyone. Thank you.
Bye.